Corey Kupfer, thank you so much for coming on Succession Stories today. It was really great to meet you on your podcast. I was a guest on DealQuest a couple of months ago, and we got connected through other podcast friends. And I guess there's kind of this network of us. And we had a great conversation. Obviously, on my show, we're going to talk about you. But if anyone wants to catch my episode on your podcast, obviously I encourage them to do that. But I wanted to first welcome you and just a quick brief background for the audience so they know a little bit about you. What I find really interesting about very skilled people like yourself, the last thing I'll say is really, for many people, the first thing they would say. So that's a little preview. But you're an expert strategist, deal maker, business consultant, and you have more than 35 years of experience as an entrepreneur and negotiator. And then the last thing you usually mention about yourself, at least on your website anyway, is that you're an attorney. And I just thought that was really cool because you really emphasize the business side of your experience. So Corey, welcome.
It's great to be here, Laurie. I'm really looking forward to our talk.
Thank you. Well, why don't we start with your background? Where'd you grow up? And just tell us a little bit about yourself when you were younger.
Sure. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, to low middle class, parents. We weren't poor. We always had food on the table, but it was sort of paycheck to paycheck, kind of thing. And, always, if you ask my mother, she would tell you that she knew I'd be a lawyer since I could talk, because I was always negotiating and advocating and, convincing. So I grew up in Brooklyn. I actually went to a high school that had a special program on law, politics, and community affairs in Brooklyn, which was pretty cool. And I got into that, and that sort of triggered my interest in becoming a lawyer, although, of course, I didn't really know what that meant, at that time. But I went into college thinking that I wanted to go to law school, which is pretty unusual for, a kid to sort of have that idea. And that's what I ended up doing. And then, of course, things evolved in very different ways than maybe I thought would be, but at least I had that vision that I was going to be a lawyer for a number of years.
So this negotiating that you were doing as a teenager, as a kid, was that with siblings to get more of their candy, or with your parents about staying up later, or what kind of things were they?
Well, I mean, so I have a younger sibling who's, 5-6 years younger. So I didn't have to use a lot of negotiation on him because force worked,
fear factor
until of course I, grew out of that phase. But yeah, I was definitely with my parents. I mean, sure, negotiating to stay up later, negotiating, to get what whatever I want, especially because money was somewhat limited. My mom tells a story on how I convinced her somehow to come in, and it was during the holidays. I have of Jewish descent, and they had mothers coming in during Christmas and during Easter and Passover to cook. And I convinced her to cook potato latkes for the class, and somehow didn't fail to mention that she was going to be the only. She got the impression there were going to be other mothers doing it, and somehow I failed to mention that. So she likes telling that story on how I convinced her.
You convinced her
doing that, my whole approach to negotiating now was authentic negotiating. That's what my book is on. I was probably in the third grade, a little less authentic than I probably should have been.
If you could only rewind.
Exactly.
So let's talk about the entrepreneurship gene. How did you decide on that course in business and doing your own thing and setting up your own shingle as an attorney, as opposed to joining a larger firm?
Well, so what's really interesting, and it goes back, to way before me being an attorney, and it's interesting to use the word gene, because neither of my parents, but both of my parents worked with somebody their entire lives. So I didn't have that model in any way. So it's hard for me to understand where it came from, because I didn't have a lot of models for it in my family. But for somehow, when I was 15, I ran a business with, let's call them contractors. I wasn't withholding taxes on their pay. But, I used to deliver flyers door to door in Brooklyn, like supermarket circulars and whatever, print stuff that you would go and stick in people's screen doors. And I get paid by a company, to do that. I got hired. I was like started at 14, I think. And get paid a penny a piece to deliver these things. And I started stopping in stores on the route and telling the store owners, hey, we deliver flyers if you need it. And I got my own accounts, and I hired my friends, and the business model of that business was that you'd have an older kid who would drive, and drop off the younger kids and then check up to make sure that they were actually delivering the flyers as opposed to put them in the garbage or the sewer. But I didn't drive at that time. So I rode around on my bike and checked up on my crew. And, in I'm going to date myself now, but, in 1976 at 15 years old, I was making $300 a week running this flyer business, which was a ridiculous amount of money for anybody. That guy, I'm certainly a low middle class kid. And I did that for 2 years and then, went away to college and just sort of gave up the business. I didn't understand enterprise value back then. And the fact that I probably could have sold those accounts to another kid. But it was good. Yeah. So I was an entrepreneur before I was an attorney, I had that something about it, drew me. And in college, I ran businesses. So I won't get into the detail, but so for me, I did start out at a big law firm and then a medium-sized law firm, but I always sort of knew I didn't want to work for somebody for the rest of my life. I was clear on that. I was just getting the experience and the contacts. And then I actually made a decision a little less than 6 years in, but at 6 years I left. And my decision was, I knew I wanted to do something on my own, but did I want it to be a law firm or did I want it to be some other type of business? And I took off about 3.5 months and skied up at Killington, 40 something days. After I left, the firm I was at, and just really thought about it and said, hey, what do I want to do here? And I realized that, I liked the practice of law. I just didn't like it working for someone else. And if I did it on my own, that's what my skills and contacts are. And that's what I ended up doing after about 6 years at other firms.
And was it pretty clear from the get-go that you wanted to focus on corporate and business law?
Well, what's interesting is when I first graduated law school, I was sure I wanted to be a management side labor law attorney. I don't know why. I took courses that sounded interesting. I got a job. I was very fortunate. I graduated at a good law school, NYU, in 1985. It was a boom time. I had, the way it works with law firms, if you go to good schools, is that you get summer office for your second summer. And then if they like you, then they offer you a permanent job, and you actually go into your third year of law school knowing you have a job when you graduate, which is kind of crazy. So I had like 17 job offers. I could have had more, and I picked what was the top management side labor law firm in the country at that time. It was the prime pick. And then, as life has it, within a year, between the fact that this was 1985, corporate deals were hot. It was the tax year change that came in 86. The firm I was at brought in a new partner to head the labor department, who was a terrible person to work for. So I had a pull to go to the corporate side instead of driving me out of the labor side. And, that year I ended up splitting time, and then I switched over. So, within a year, I ended up moving to corporate, but that was not what I thought I was going to be doing.
You have a passion for deals. You have a deal-driven mindset. You talk about a deal-driven mindset. What is that? Why is it important?
Well, so, there's really two fundamental ways that businesses can grow, right? And whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're an executive at a bigger company, you either grow organically or inorganically is one way to divide it, right? The organic way is that it's sales and marketing and providing great products and services. And if you can't do that as a business, you can't be successful, right? Unless you're one of the tiny percentage of companies that is formed just to do acquisitions, just to be a roll-up company. But most businesses are operating businesses. You have to get a client or customer and be able to get another one and provide great products and services. But there is such a smaller percentage of companies that actually grow the other way, inorganically, which is deal-driven growth. And there's all these misperceptions out there about, I need to be big, I need to have capital, it's only M&A, and there's strategic alliances and joint ventures and licensing deals and online affiliate deals. And I can go on for the rest of your podcast just listing the types of deals that companies can do. And the reason I'm passionate about it is because there are so many, so I'm very tied in the entrepreneurial community. I was a member of Entrepreneurs Organization for over a decade. I was president of the New York chapter. I love working with growing companies of any size, not just entrepreneurial companies, even big companies, as long as they have a growth mentality, because they're building, right? They're building something. They have a vision. They want to create something new, or they want to build on something that they built. It creates jobs. It creates new products and services, which are hopefully good for the world. So that's just a passion of mine. So one of the ways to help them do that, I'm not a sales, you can be a sales consultant, right? Or help people grow organically. That's not my thing. I love the strategy. I love the negotiation. I love figuring out structures. I love figuring out how there could be synergies between different parties. And that's just, sort of my gift and my passion. So, and I think it's so underutilized by companies, who maybe aren't growing as fast as they want, or they, get stagnated, or, or in ownership succession, right, situations, whether it's, I know you do a lot of family business stuff. I mean, it comes up with, family business comes up with other businesses. What do we do as things evolve and as founders, want to roll out? Do we sell internally? Do we sell externally? I love helping people figure, that stuff out. And I find just deals in negotiating and growth through that route. Just, it's just exciting. It's something I'm passionate about.
You're also passionate about entrepreneurial freedom. I've
Yeah.
seen that phrase in your work also. And, we did talk a little bit about that in terms of what entrepreneurs can do to really create enterprise value. You hinted that earlier with your flyer business. And
Yeah.
so for somebody wondering, they might think, oh, well, it might mean growing top line revenue. And it might, right? Certainly the size of the company matters, or it might mean profitability. Of course, the profitability of your company matters too, but there's other factors that come into play. So let's start with entrepreneurial freedom. What does that mean to you? And then we'll segue into some of the other things that I want to dive in related to enterprise value.
Sure. So, I mean, some of the things you mentioned, could be ways that some of that might be measured, or metrics that you're shooting for. But ultimately, what I think it comes down to, and it's, it's interesting to me how many folks go on what they say is the entrepreneurial journey and they don't have freedom, right? They bought themselves a job, they're self-employed, they're really not entrepreneurs. And I want to be really, really clear. I don't say that with any judgment, right? There's a lot of judgment out there in the entrepreneurial world, on, oh, you just have a lifestyle business. No. For me, it's a matter of what you want, like self-awareness, right? If you're very happy being a solo, whatever, whether it's a solo practitioner as a lawyer, or you're a consultant, computer consultant, whatever you are, and you're thrilled and you have a nice business, you make a nice living, it gives you the lifestyle you want, more power to you. If you're happy, you're better off than most people out there. I don't care what size company they have, right? In fact, my, thing is everybody should have a lifestyle business. That lifestyle business could be, the next Facebook, or it could be working out of your home bedroom with a few clients and making a decent living. The question is what lifestyle you want to create, what's aligned with who you are. So for me, but for me, there are so many folks who become what they call entrepreneurs, and then they're not happy with it because they bought themselves a job, and because there's all the ups and downs and struggles of being in entrepreneurship without that regular paycheck. And they haven't really taken advantage of a lot of the benefits of being an entrepreneur because they don't feel free, right? And so for me, I sort of say, why start your own business unless it's going to provide you with freedom? And now listen, take it with a grain of salt, because I wear this bracelet here. It says freedom on it. It's the only piece of jewelry I wear. It's from myintent.org, a great organization where you get any word put on one of these things. And freedom is my highest value in life, period, not just in the entrepreneurial context. I mean, I'm talking about freedom from everybody in the world, from oppression, to the reason I'm an entrepreneur. So for me, what I value most is, if somebody said you can make 10 times the amount of money you're making now, Corey, right? But you're going to lose, forget 10 times the freedom, you're going to lose half the freedom you have now. I'm a no, right? Right. What I have started my businesses for is to be able to create the life I want. And that means lifestyle. That means, if I want to take a vacation and go somewhere, spend time with my wife. It also means if I have passion projects that I want to work on, it also means how I handle my clients, who I hire, the kind of culture I create. I want the freedom to have a vision and fulfill on that vision without there being impediments in my way. And that vision's a holistic vision, not only of what my businesses look like, but what my life looks like in relation to those businesses and the opportunities that provides.
Yeah, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs can relate to that. A lot of people who start a company, or if you say maybe they've acquired a company, maybe it's a franchise, or maybe that's they're the next generation that has acquired ownership of their family company. So yes, you can be that role where you are striving for the next thing, and it's the freedom to choose whatever that next thing is, or it's, as you said, funding a lifestyle that's important to you. So whatever that choice is. So freedom is a great word. I'm glad you showed your bracelet there for anybody watching on video on YouTube. You'll see Corey do that. That's really cool. When we talk about creating enterprise value, sometimes owners think about themselves as the differentiator. They are the special sauce. They are the ones who have the client relationships. They understand what the needs are, the customer needs. They might be then developing products and services, even delivering the value. And then what's happening? Well, the problems are coming back to them. And it's like, we call this the owner's trap.
Yep.
And a company that cannot survive without its owner or the person at the helm is essentially a worthless company. You've probably seen this. And let's reflect on that. What are the most common pitfalls that entrepreneurs face when they're trying to create value, but maybe they are in their own way?
Yeah, there's no question about it. I mean, listen, the person you've described has at best made themselves more valuable as an employee to be hired by somebody, right? Later. They have not created, I mean, in fact, it's the exact opposite thing that creates enterprise value in entrepreneurial and growing companies, right? They become less dependent upon their founders and their owners, because if you can't systemize, if you can't build team, if you can't, I mean, if it's less transferable if it's dependent upon any one person, whether that's you or anybody else. So, this conversation of freedom that we just had, for me, ties very much into that, because, and it may seem counterintuitive, right? Because a lot of times people think of freedom as, oh, they're going to take time off, they're going to do this stuff, whatever. And, well, they won't be as effective in building their business, so it won't be worth as much. And there is a balance, obviously. And there's also stages, right? I mean, listen, it's a great theory to talk about entrepreneurial freedom if you're in startup mode, right? And I remember when I first started, I was hustling. I was going to every networking event there was. I was figuring out how to buy, supplies and staples, because I had nobody to do that. And I had, so trust me, I understand that entrepreneurial freedom is a luxury, and it comes at a point after a lot of work. But those conversations are consistent, because the more free you get up, you get to be as an owner, as a founder, the less dependent your company is upon you. And then the more valuable it is. And by the way, it also frees you up. I have this whole other conversation that I have with executives and owners and entrepreneurs about highest and best use. And for me, I think our goal always is to get into doing ideally only our highest and best use areas, which has to be something we're great at, but that's not enough. We also have to be passionate about it. We got to love it, right? You talked about how I love, structuring deals and negotiating, right? So I'm good at it. I love it. But then there's a third factor. When you're the founder, owner, executive leader of a company, it's also got to be highly leveraged. It's got to make a big difference in the business, because there can be stuff you're great at and you love doing, but it doesn't matter, right? It's not important. So when you can focus on those three things, first of all, you feel much more freedom, because you're doing what you love, you're doing what you're great at, you're doing what's making a difference, it's growing your company. But you have other people who are running it, building it, et cetera. And for the most part, I think entrepreneurs find that those areas that they focus on are things that are only going to increase the value of the company even more, because they're going to be future focused. They're not going to be putting out fires, dealing with HR issues, dealing with that client issue today. They're going to be forward looking and being able to stay in vision and doing what, if you are a founder, hopefully you're best at.
So we talked a lot about the seller side. Now let's switch over to the buyer side. And what generally do you find when you're doing these deals? And you work on both sides, right? Seller and buyer. Yeah. And you're also, I'm understanding from your experience that you work with a lot of different size companies, privately held and also I think some publicly traded ones too. But let's say for the purposes of this discussion, let's talk about private companies. And so a company that's looking to be sold, it's good to look at their value from the lens of a third party. Like ultimately the value of your company is going to be determined by whoever is willing to pay for it, right? Ultimately. And they want to get this predictable future flow of profits. And they're looking for reasons to discount your multiple and your value. What are those things that tend to surprise the seller when offers come back and maybe the number doesn't match what they had in mind? What are some of those reasons that you see?
Well, listen, let's start at a fundamental level, which is that many, many sellers overvalue their business, right? So, that's a starting point. And I'm going to sort of, give people the tough, bad news. The tough, bad news is that the market doesn't care how long it took you to build your business, right? yes, there's some value in longevity in terms of if you built a brand or a reputation, right? I'm not discounting that, but the fact that you slave for 20 years or 30 years, right? The company's going to look at, somebody who got there in 10 years, the same place you are, maybe is more valuable because of their growth rate, right? So, it doesn't matter that, this is your heart and soul. It doesn't matter, like, for many entrepreneurs, it's their baby, right? Right. And because it's their baby, they put so much more value on it. Laurie's right. I mean, ultimately, it's what somebody will pay, right? And somebody's going to look at you have to remember, they're going to look at your business much more objectively than you are. And they're also going to see some of the problems that you don't see. So, what are the things that come up other than just starting point differences in valuation? There's a lot you want to do to prepare yourself. First of all, we talked about it being less dependent upon you. So if you've really created a business that's less dependent upon you, then you probably have a core team, right? Executive team, management team, whatever, that are really important. And what you want to do is be able to structure a deal where those folks are going to be interested and happy in coming along, because in many deals, it's not always true. Sometimes there are acquirers who have all kinds of infrastructure and executive team or whatever, and they're just buying up your client list or buying your technology, but in many, many cases, right, part of the big value that you've created in your company is the management team that you've built. So you want to structure a deal and approach a deal in a way and approach them in a way where they're going to come along with the deal, because if they don't come along with the deal, then it's not as valuable, to folks. Obviously, having your house in order. I mean, it is, listen, I can't tell you how many times we're doing cleanup, right, on companies legally. The accountants are coming in and cleaning up the financials. If you are going to sell, ideally, you're going to look at this as a multi-year process, right? You're going to get yourself in shape for sale years in advance, right? Which means that you're going to have somebody come in and look at your financials. You're going to have like 3 years of really nice financials, which have been, if not audited, at least reviewed at a heavy level. We do a lot of pre-due diligence with our clients. Like, we know what buyers are going to be looking for. So as opposed to going in and have something blow up, because let me take a step back. Well, you mentioned, Laurie, like the buyer is always looking for reasons, to discount, and frankly, at certain levels, looking for reasons not to do the deal, right? Very often you have a buyer where some level of executive has made the decision, I'm interested in this company, let's do it. But the people who are coming in and actually getting the deal done, the ones who are doing the due diligence, certainly, they're financial people, they're legal people, they're operations people, they're HR people, right? A lot of those people, you got to understand their mentality, right? Unlike a lot of the founders, some of them, right? I'm not saying all of them, right? But some of them are looking at this and saying, hey, if this deal goes through and I've missed something and something blows up, my job's in trouble, right? So they're very, very cautious, and they're very worried. They're very maybe over-indexed on what could go wrong, because some of them are not the kind of people who are looking at the vision on the upside. So you need to pre-prepare for that. And then when you work with good professionals, they're going to know what the buyer is going to be looking for. And we put our clients through a pre-due diligence process, right? So that we basically put them through the due diligence first. So we catch anything that's going to be a problem, we get them really set up well, to do it. Now, listen, sometimes circumstances happen and you don't have the luxury of being years in advance. Markets change, health changes for an owner, whatever it is. And, you have to scramble. But the point is, you still want to do as much as you can in advance to get the company looking as good as you can, because you don't want to be in a position where the buyer comes in and sees some smoke and thinks, where's the fire I don't know about, right? Even if it doesn't exist. So that's really important. And then, the final thing I'll say is that you get clarity as a seller on, and this is true seller buy side. I always push total clarity on exactly what you want, right? And how you want it. But also with sellers, I work with them in a very different way to get clarity on what they're going to do next. And by the way, that's okay if it's 250 rounds of golf, or it's travel the world, or if it's start your new company. But I've seen deals go bad on the seller side where they think they want to sell, right? Logically, they know it makes sense to sell. And then, time goes on a little bit and they go down the deal road, and there's something emotionally, something spiritually, something mentally, whatever it is, that just doesn't allow them to do it. And they either sabotage the deal, or they're miserable through the process. And, so you really want to make sure you want to sell and then figure out what's next for you. Because if you don't have something to live into, sometimes it can backfire.
Yeah, 100%. I can understand that from the vantage point of my clients, where they talk about that. This is, their second or third generation, or they're the founder, their name's on the door. So I see a range of all of those things. And I find the what's next conversation is really, really important. And I work with clients on this business readiness. How do we get your business ready? And then also the personal readiness. And so glad you brought that up too. I think we're definitely on the same page about that. I think you have to let it percolate. It's not a microwave oven process. It's more like a slow cooker.
That's right.
So I'm curious about your experience working with technology companies. You mentioned you are very tied in with the entrepreneurial network and tech. When a company is looking to buy a technology, they might be doing it as an acqui-hire, right? They really want the talent, not so much the tech. But in other situations, they want the technology. It's filling a strategic gap in their offering. And ultimately, when the seller, is hearing across the table all these wonderful signals, might be thinking, this is great. And then the potential buyer, leaves the boardroom, they go back to their offices. I'm wondering if the conversation is, hey, should we just build what they have? And what have you seen around that when tech is being evaluated and the digital assets from a build versus buy standpoint? What makes a deal go through or not go through? What examples might you have to share?
Yeah, it's a great question because the buyers are always making that build versus buy, analysis, right? And then on the seller side, especially if it's a bigger player, right? There's always a concern. So part of it is just how you create value, and then part of it is just sort of how you protect yourself. So let's talk about how you create value. One of the biggest things that you want to do when you're a new technology company like that who's looking for an acquisition, to be or sale to be your exit, is your ability to get as much. Well, first of all, obviously, quality of the product helps. But the truth is, if you're dealing with, a buyer who's bigger, usually they could, especially after they've seen what you've done, right? They could figure out a way to build it, right? I mean, there are exceptions, but for the most part, trust me, they could pay developers who are as smarter than the people that that build your product. But obviously, the better it is, the more advantage it is. It does change the sort of buy versus build analysis a little bit. But the bigger thing is, sort of speed to market and access to customers and adoption. And it's why in the online world, and people don't understand this, you sort of get crazy about the valuations that are paid for companies that are pre-revenue, but they have a lot of, users, right? I mean, a great example, right? That we've seen over, the last number of months, and no matter when this airs, it's going to be true for a while, is, Clubhouse, right? Clubhouse is in beta still at this moment when we're recording, but even if it comes out of beta, I mean, they have millions and millions, they're getting the attention, they're getting the eyeballs, they're getting whatever, right? They haven't figured out how to monetize it yet. They may have plans, etc., right? Clubhouse is worth a ridiculous amount of money now, right? They haven't earned $1, I don't believe, because I don't see how they monetize it. I'm just using that as an example. We've seen it with other social media sites, other technologies, whatever. Why? Because attention, because clients, right? Customers that you can monetize in the future, either directly through that platform, or that you could then cross-sell, upsell, or whatever, where you get their information for other products and services, super valuable. So, that's the biggest single thing that you can do. And some tech founders sort of, forget that because they get enamored by their, cool technology and how innovative they are. And, the truth is, it's most of the times it's easy, you can knock that off. Now, in terms of protections, there's always this chicken and egg conversation, right? Some people never get a deal done because they're so afraid that somebody's going to steal, their technology, that they'll never sit at the table. And on the flip side, some people go in totally unprotected. And the problem, the challenge is that especially big companies, and if you're really small and they're big companies, they're often not going to sign, you can do an NDA, non-disclosure agreement, but big companies are often not going to sign that blind because they got 100 or 1,000 things going on in research and development, and they don't want to be held back. So, there's got to be a way that you are guided to, share certain things at some point, and then if they express an interest, then you can get, an NDA in place and try to get some protections. But I will tell you up front that, there's always some level of risk. If you're looking to do a deal, especially with bigger companies, there's always some level of risk that they are going to go down this road and then decide to build instead. So you got to understand that. That's part of the game.
It is part of the game for sure. Let's talk about trusted advisors. If there's an entrepreneur or founder, someone who's owning a company thinking about a potential sale, at what point should they enlist the support of, let's say if it's somebody like myself, hopefully I'm already working with them, right? We're working on the value of their company. But at what point, it's probably too late if they've already got an LOI in hand and are looking to react to it, right? But talk about this phase of readiness where they're feeling really ready and they want to bring it to market, or perhaps an offer has come their way unsolicited.
Yeah, so listen, I feel very fortunate because, there's exceptions. Obviously, sometimes I get referred in the deals at a later stage, and I was just referred. But with my clients that I work with, regularly over the years, they bring me in very early because, and there's a hesitancy, frankly, especially with lawyers, to bring them in early because lawyers have a reputation, which, by the way, most lawyers will deny. I think it's actually valid for some portion of the profession. I'll be honest with you, as deal killers, and now every lawyer says they're a deal maker because they have to say that because to try to combat that. But the truth is, listen, I'll come back to your question, but I have a mini rant. The problem with my profession is that we go to law school and we are over-indexed on risk, evaluating risk, understanding risk, trying to mitigate risk, making clients aware of risk is a super important part of what we do. But the thing with lawyers is that you don't read cases on all the deals that went well, because there are no cases on deals that went well. The only thing you learn in law school is everything that went wrong, right? So it's easy to be over-indexed on, on the risk side. You need to balance the risk side, which is important to, like I said, versus the opportunity side. And that's what great business leaders and entrepreneurs do, right? You can't be successful in business without taking risks. You just want to make it be knowing risk, that you mitigate the best you can, that you're aware of, et cetera. So in any case, the point is that the reason it relates back to your question is that some folks are hesitant to bring in certain professionals like lawyers too early because they feel like they're going to mess up the deal, right? But the problem is, even when you've gone to an LOI, some people say, hey, well, LOI is non-binding. Why do I need a lawyer? Well, first of all, and this is the minor point, most LOIs actually have at least a couple of sections that are binding, right? There could be exclusivities, it could be non-chops, it could be, confidentiality, it could, there's something. But second of all, most importantly, it's very hard to go back later in a deal, even though the LOI is non-binding, right? And say, I want to change this major part of what we agreed on the LOI because the other, your counterpart on the other side of the table feels like you're retrading the deal, right? And can they trust you? Like, do they really want to do business with you? That was a fundamental deal point. So we get involved early because we want to anticipate some of those things that may affect the LOI. We want to even, a lot of clients call us even just to say, hey, I'm thinking about doing this deal. Should I do it? What do you think, our business? So ideally, you have the kind of relationship with counsel and with your financial people, especially, and with any kind of business, a coach, consultant, whatever. Those folks should be with you all the time. Hopefully those folks are sort of your brain trust and your trusted circle, and you're going to bring them in, early on. Now, listen, if you're just, bringing somebody in as a hired gun, to do a specific thing on the deal, sure, bring them in later. But I think legal, financial, and consulting, are crucial to bring in early. And then obviously, if you're of the size company or it's appropriate, where you're going to bring in an investment banker, or business broker into the process, then, they're also going to be in early because they're going to help shop the deal.
I think that's a good list. I would also add wealth management, because once the deal closes, you really need a plan for where the funds are going.
100%. And that's a big sector for us, financial services. We represent hundreds of independent investment advisory firms. It's a big niche for us. And 100%. So great that you added that. It's absolutely perfect.
Well, we covered a lot of ground. Is there anything else that you would want to share today that I didn't ask you about?
I think the only thing I would say is that, we started to get into it sort of early in the interview. And one of the things I was talking about is sort of the mindset, right, of a deal maker. What makes somebody a deal maker? And, and some people sort of look at deal maker as this kind of thing where, this wheeler dealer, that's not what I'm talking about. I mean, the question is, are you the kind of person that, first of all, can create so if you're running a company, you're selling a product and service to customers, right? You have a value proposition for that. You have a vision for that. You look out, you're going to grow on that side. You know how you're going to create marketing, materials that align with that value proposition, hopefully, so customers and clients can see. It's the same body of work to do deals, right?
Right.
Why should somebody want to do a deal with you? Why should they, let you acquire them or do a joint venture with them or strategic alliance? So there's a certain sort of, approach, a certain mentality, a certain way of thinking where you apply some similar things to what you do on the client. What is your value proposition to that company that you want to acquire? Why should they join you, right? Why should they want to do a joint distribution deal with you, a marketing deal with you, or whatever it is? And then how do you create the value proposition? How do you communicate that to them? And also, how do you build a team and resources to be able to focus on that, because your operations team is not going to be able to do that and still run and grow the business. So, I just want to bring in sort of that mentality. And that is something like entrepreneurship, like other things that some people are much more natural at, and they have an advantage. But it is also, a learned skill for those folks who are willing to do it and take the risk. And, they may not be as natural at it. And I think that's an important piece of the puzzle, is to start. And it's frankly the reason why I started the DealQuest podcast. It's not like I don't monetize that. I don't have advertising. I just want people to be able to listen in and hear from all these different deal makers and people who have done deals and whatever, and start to get that mentality shift and start to open up their mind to the possibilities, so that they can, potentially look at that. And it may not be right for everybody, but at least it becomes something on the menu. Yeah.
And I can definitely say that the DealQuest podcast, I think, is great. Not only because I've been on it as a guest, you have great guests, but also you do solo casts, which I think is where you get a little deeper on a specific topic. So if people want to find you online, Corey, what's the best way to find you?
Yeah. So my sort of hub website is CoreyKupfer.com, CoreyKupfer.com. They can get to the law firm site, through their Kupfer Law. And then all of my social media is at Corey Kupfer, LinkedIn and Facebook and Clubhouse now and all that stuff. So, but CoreyKupfer.com is the hub. It's got everything I'm doing in terms of my speaking and training and workshops, and also, links to the law firm stuff. It's got my books, got the podcast. So that's the best place to go.
You're probably the most entrepreneurial lawyer I know. Absolutely. So last question for you. Do you have a favorite quote about entrepreneurship that you can share?
The thing I think about is it may not be directly on entrepreneurship, but it's totally related to me, and it's used in the context. I love the quote about that it's about jumping off the cliff and making your wings on the way down. Because for me, that is my approach to life, but it's also, and definitely entrepreneurship. I mean, I started my firm with no clients, in debt, with nowhere, and I think those of us who are really, true entrepreneurs, and I don't mean that in a judgment way. There are situational entrepreneurs who become very successful, right? And they're situational entrepreneurs because they get laid off and they have a few clients, whatever. But for those of us who, are excited about creating something out of nothing, that's part of what you have to do. I mean, you can only see so far ahead. And if you wait for everything to be perfect, it's never going to be the case. So you got to jump off that cliff and make your wings on the way down.
I love it. It's a great quote. Corey, thank you so much for joining me today on Succession Stories. It was awesome to talk to you.
Laurie, it was a pleasure to be with you.